Well, good morning to anybody who may be listening to my ranting today. My watch is wrong, so I discovered that today is the 25th of December and not the 24th only a few minutes ago, because I received one of those happy Christmas messages. It's such a wicked season, I think, from a biblical perspective. And the church, of course, has embraced it, generally speaking. They try to make a good thing out of a bad one. Some of them know that it's a bad one, but they still have their carols and all the rest of it. I had thought this year that it would be fitting maybe to... I've never celebrated Christmas since becoming a Christian, as far as I can remember. It was one of the first things that I took offence at, really, because I remember I went to Italy and my wife had bought a tree and was decorating it, and they'd made a nativity scene. Or perhaps I'd assisted in making a nativity scene. I used to, before I became a Christian. I'd built a little model of a stable out of wood, and I had a few figures and bits and pieces that I'd put in there. And my daughter really liked it. I mean, it was a pleasant and interesting thing to do. But it's unrighteous. And the Bible says, have no part in the unfruitful works of unrighteousness, I think, of darkness. The unfruitful works of darkness. So I'm rethinking my plan. Nobody in my road has decorated their house that I've been able to see. Even the 3 or 4 white residents. But of course everybody else is, as far as I know, Muslim. So I thought this year, well, maybe I'll just light 3 candles, because I noticed that they were selling some quite elegant tapered candles at the hardware store, and I bought 3. And I have a candle holder that has 3 positions, and I thought, well, I'll place that in the window at the front of my house, and then people will see that I'm somewhat in line, or that I'm showing something more beautiful at this moment in time. But I'm going to avoid that now, because again, it's the wrong signal, isn't it, at this time of the year. I might light them at some other random time, but I'm not going to have the New Year stuff either, because of course that's all wrong. The New Year starts in the springtime, I think on the 1st of April perhaps, and we are really approaching the deep midwinter now, not hardly the New Year. We just live in complete deception from pillar to post, and only studying the Bible will reveal the truth. And that sometimes presents some difficulties. I find, I struggle with understanding creation, the creation story, understanding it, and really not with believing it. Because when I read Genesis, the first chapter of Genesis, and then the second chapter of Genesis, it seemed to me plain that Adam was created at a later time, after the creation of man, male and female, created he them. which happened on the sixth day. And then there's this creation of Adam out of the dust of the earth. Now at church they immediately told me, oh no, that's just they're just giving more details about the creation of man. It's not a separate event. But, as a translator, I wouldn't have immediately thought that. So I became a believer in what they call the pre-Adamite race. And it made so much sense also when I had to answer those questions which I was asked as a new Christian. How did, with who did the children of Adam and Eve marry? And suggesting that mankind was created from incestuous relationships, forbidden relationships, actually, not at the time because the law wasn't extant, but it was soon to come. And it explains how Cain went off and established kingdoms and great cities. So my understanding is that Adam was created when the earth was already populated. But that, there are problems when you read Genesis and the first 2 books of Genesis with that understanding, and I haven't answered them all. I don't know. I really don't. And I've followed the understanding that Adam means showing blood in the face. So I see Adam sort of as the first white man, because it's us that show blood in the face. But thinking about it, I do think that the children of Japheth, the Chinese people and the people from the Far East, I think they can blush also. But certainly showing blood in the face is interesting, isn't it? Because blushing it's kind of an awareness of, an inbuilt awareness of your wickedness. So you blush when you're caught is something, or you blush at your nakedness. So there's something spiritual about blushing, and it really is you have to have pale skin. I don't think black people can blush, or perhaps they can, but it's not visible, so you don't really know. But if you're speaking to somebody of my race and they blush as they're speaking, then they're telling you more than they're saying with that automatic reaction. So that's kind of interesting. And then, of course, the world was destroyed in the flood. So that would mean the matter of pre-Adamite races and, Adam become slightly irrelevant because everybody was destroyed except for Noah, who was perfect in his generations. So scholars understand, or I've heard and I believe that perfect in his generations means that he was racially pure, something which at the time was just unheard of because there'd been so much intermingling going on and sexual wickedness in the old world, with ungodly creatures also, with these Nephilim, these fallen angels. So then we reset and we have to look at the children of Adam. But again, if the flood was in fact a complete annihilation. Now, the Bible says that, but the Bible says in several points that a population has been completely annihilated, but then they crop up later. So I'm not sure that a complete annihilation means exactly what it, literally, because the races do seem to survive these cataclysmic events or acts of God. There seems that there's, always a remnant. Now, a remnant is only really promised to the children of Israel. That's always promised. But, you have to wonder, so Bertrand Comparet claimed that the flood was local, and he identified a very large basin in northern China of vast dimensions, and he found historical records to show that great flooding had occurred at around about the time of the biblical flood, and the flooding had reached up to the mountains surrounding the rim of this vast area, which would have been an enormous sea with no bounds visible from a ship. And that theory is useful because it explains why ancient cultures, well, the Chinese culture, I suppose, in particular, there seems to be no record of the annihilation of a worldwide flood. And this is one of the objections that atheists will raise against the Bible. I mean, the Bible has to make sense. I know that perhaps it's not our job, you could say, to explain the workings of God, and that's fortunate because I certainly can't. But I do meditate on those things. And, Comparet was summarizing positions that theologians have reached over the years, I suppose, and it's interesting to note that Comparet is a forbidden theologian. Really, his stuff was removed. He's under great prejudice because he is seen as a white supremacist and a wicked man and everything. And I certainly don't agree with many of the things that he says, but he offers new perspectives. Also, the problem with somebody like Comparet is that when he was writing, and because of his extraction, I suppose, he wouldn't have understood biblical cosmology. He never mentioned such a thing. And this change of the nature of our earth has been perhaps the greatest offense, the greatest deception. So if you don't understand biblical cosmology, then a worldwide flood, again, you have enormous problems with it, because you have to have water of such a volume of water on this spinning ball to cover the highest mountains. So water miles and miles deep. But, if you have, well, the biblical earth, it can certainly happen because we're in an enclosed system. And so water can fill up to the level that God chooses. I mean, obviously, I'm trying to make physical case for things that is maybe inappropriate, but so it is. There certainly was a flood. The other thing that Comparet found was that there's a mountain in that range up in northern China whose name he could trace back to it being called Mount Ararat. And he points out that the popular understanding of the place where the ark was grounded is the Ararat Mountains, plural, in Turkey. So he thinks he has a stronger case for claiming a local flood. So that changes everything, doesn't it? But from Noah, we have Ham, Japheth, and Shem. And I think it's generally understood that we are the children of Shem. We are the Shemites. That's why you get this anti-Semitism, you see, because we would be the Jews. But anti-Semitism is characterized quite differently in modern newspapers, of course. And then you have the Hamites, who would be the black and brown people. That would be I think, the mainstream understanding. And the Japhethites, who are the Eastern people, the Chinese, and so on and so forth. But the Eastern people, it seemed to me, don't crop up much in the Bible, although there's a great Christian movement in the east of the world. And I was looking at the Garden of Eden, of course, was eastwards. So we were expelled to the east of the Garden of Eden. So that's another support for the idea that this immense basin could have been the scene of the worldwide flood that ultimately wasn't, worldwide, although that world was the world of the Adamites at that time. The world of the descendants of Adam, and all the corruption that had occurred. They're interesting questions. The children of Japheth, I think, can be identified in the wise men from the East who attended the birth of Christ. But even thinking about the birth of Christ and all the mythology that's been constructed around it, the non-biblical mythology, just, it's so pervasive in modern society. The idea that there were 3 wise men, when of course they're not numbered. It could have been a host, for all we know. And they came from the east, so these were children of Japheth, and they were wise, and wisdom is a very, very high characteristic, should we say, biblically, if we follow Solomon. So perhaps this was an appearance of the children of Japheth. I think that would be reasonable. And I'm sure there are other places in the Bible where the children of Japheth do appear, but I haven't Googled it as we have to do these days, so I don't know it. But you have to be careful with Google and these matters. Google is extremely useful for the translation I'm doing at the moment, which is about a pair of rimless spectacles, and I have to know everything about rimless spectacles and their construction. And Google is reliable. It takes a little while sometimes, but It's valuable. In fact, if anything I produce doesn't align up with Google, I might be in hot water. But in the matter of theology, Google is a very different matter, isn't it? Really, you have to be so careful. So that's why I proposed some time ago, let's just talk about stuff that we've found in the Bible, and then without Googling it. And that's the way I talk. I generally, when I address a subject, I haven't Googled it first, generally speaking. So, some of the things that I say won't line up. Many of them, perhaps. God bless this morning.